I'm talking with Stan Deetz from the University of Colorado. Stan is the author of A Critical Theory of Communication Applied to Organizations. Stan, what's the essence of critical theories?
I think almost every critical theory believes that it's possible in a society that people don't have the opportunity to freely form meanings or freely express the kinds of ideas that they have. And almost all critical theories try to look at those aspects of society that restrict either the way we think or the ways in which we express ourselves.
Does that suggest that there's a power imbalance in there?
Most of the kinds of restrictions take place around issues of power, some of them explicitly so in the sense that we feel censored or we feel pressured by someone, but a lot of them implicitly so in the sense that powerful people have had the opportunity to build institutions and structures that exist, and to the extent that we live and work in those institutions, we inadvertently reproduce the kind of power that they have.
And so it perpetuates itself.
That's right, it perpetuates itself, but always with our own activities. Power has no ability to affect us except as we, in fact, enact those power structures ourselves. If that were not the case, then we'd probably be engaging in revolution.
Are there other things that most critical theorists are critical of?
Well, there are lots of people in society critical of lots of things, and perhaps some people call those critical theorists. I don't take that particular view. There are a lot of people that are critical. A critical theorist is not one who simply because of some position dislikes something in society.
Knocking down the blocks or something.
That's right. That something happened to them, or they have a grudge, or they feel that their people are oppressed, or whatever else. All those things happen in society. But a critical theorist is one who tries to investigate the various kinds of structures that lead to a distortion in the communication process, either because people can't seemingly create the kinds of meanings that would represent themselves well, or find an opportunity to express them in decision processes.
You have said that you don't want your theory known just as a critical theory. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, it is a communication theory. It is not attempting to be one of many. It is meant to be a complete communication theory. It's not a particular kind or view of it. And to understand communication, for me, requires understanding the ways in which human beings create meaning.
But don't all communication theories deal with creating meaning?
Now, most communication theories presume that meaning exists somewhere, and therefore the primary problem of communication is transmission. How do we get it from here to there? And that the primary limitations that are either expression limitations or suppression. And in my particular theory, as in other social constructionist type theories, the emphasis is on the ways in which those meanings come to be developed between people. The expression becomes a second problem. But the first problem is, what kinds of meanings do we have to express? Our field for a long time argued that meanings were in people. And I raised the opposite kind of question: whose meanings are in people? How did those meanings become in people? And so it's not a matter of just getting them out. It's a matter of trying to figure out how they got in.
So conflict is necessary.
Conflict is absolutely essential to this. And in one of my arguments against most communication theories tend to be consensus theories. Can we build ways that we can come together?
And play nice.
And play nice. Instead of theories that say, can we recover the conflict we should have had? The conflict that let us see the arbitrary and constructed nature of that which we believe, so we can redecide.
Is it hard for a critical theorist to be sensitive, or do you usually, almost of necessity, come on strong?
Well, in one of my early books, I argued that a full human being has to have three characteristics. One has to be careful, thoughtful, and filled with humor. And a critical theorist obviously plays out the thoughtful part of that. How do we reflect upon experience and critically engage it? But before one can be thoughtful, one has to be careful, in the sense that one has to allow or engage with others in such a way as they can challenge what you think in the way that you are.
Do you lose your critical edge if you view with a sense of humor?
If you can't at the same time understand the edge of being a human being and the frailties and the mistakes that we make and have fun with that, I think you lose something.
In an organizational context, what specifically are you critical of?
Specifically critical of decision-making processes that are narrow and biased, that are filled with values that have not been carefully examined.
How does that happen?
It happens primarily in our corporations today because of a particular way we think about organizations that give managers control by virtue of their association with stockholders. Once managers have control, they don't necessarily represent the good of the company or necessarily the good of a society. They frequently represent the good as from how they see it within their values, and there's nothing wrong with that. A good manager, one would hope, would apply the best values they have into making decisions. but every value is from some standpoint or from point of view. And to make good decisions to work effectively on the behalf of all requires, in fact, the standpoint of others and the ability to put standpoints in regard to each other so that really creative and new ideas can come. A lot of managers talk about thinking out of the box, but they don't understand the communication process by which that happens. You do not think out of the box by commanding the box. You think out of the box precisely by bringing ideas together that don't allow dominant ideas to continue to dominate.
Can managers in present corporate setups, whether large or smaller organizations, really think about the whole?
I don't think they can think about the whole. I don't think there's any hope that any individual can think through it all. In fact, my hope is in the other, that when we start admitting that none of us can find the truth alone.
A communication theory with humility is...
That's exactly a core part of that. And truth is a community product. And a community product is aided by the addition of as many members of the community as possible, because they each give us an opportunity to test our ideas and finally emerge with ideas, not that we're the one of one or another, but in fact the ideas that couldn't have been thought without all coming together.
Who are the people that should have a voice, not just a say, but have a voice in the decision in corporate matters?
I believe that every corporation has natural sets of stakeholders that exist on a kind of continuum on out to a horizon of people who are only peripherally affected by the organization. And it's fairly easy in most contexts to really see who has made an investment in this, what is the character of their investment, and what right do they have to engage in decision making. For example, the workers become a natural investor in a company. And as we get more high-tech companies recognize this more. Their primary assets go down the elevator at night. Their primary assets is not what the investors gave them, it's what the employee gave them. The question that we ought to be asking is, what collection of people can we bring together that gives us the optimal opportunity to take into account everyone's interest in making a decision?
But if you bring everybody together, so the argument goes, you'd have chaos. They'd never be able to decide anything. No work would get done.
Well, if you brought everybody together on everything all the time, sure. But do we have, or can we pick moments of intervention? I kind of present a 10% rule. And most people in the society born either the Jewish or the Christian faith believe in tithing.
Sure.
And that the tithing is a concept that one gives back 10%. That this is something, and it isn't simply given to God, because God doesn't catch it when you throw it up in the air, right? This is, in fact, a giving back to the community. And I believe that if we took the kind of concept and said that 10% of our time ought to be involved in a sort of stakeholder coming together and making decisions, that we would find that 90% of the time was a lot more productive.